I remember the days when life felt like a carefully crafted symphony, with every note falling perfectly into place. My name is Alex, and for the longest time I was just another face in the crowd. Working at a corporate firm where I was surrounded by colleagues who I thought were friends, I led a life that seemed pretty perfect, at least on the surface. I was a humble employee, blending in with the hive of hustling office workers. Each day was an echo of the last, filled with typing, meetings, and the occasional coffee break chatter. I often enjoyed sharing stories with my colleagues, laughing over shared frustrations about deadlines, and even delving into silly debates about whose lunch leftovers were the grossest. But deep down, I harbored an ambition. I aspired to make a mark, to create something meaningful. And then the opportunity came. A presentation was approaching that could change everything for me. I remember the excitement mixed with anxiety as I prepared. It was a chance not just to shine, but to finally be recognized for my hard work. "Alex, you've got this," my friend Lisa said one morning while we stood at the coffee machine. "You've put in the effort, and everyone's going to see it." I smiled back, grateful for her support. There was a sense of camaraderie between us, one that made me believe I wasn't alone in this journey. Little did I know that trust would soon be crushed. Then there was my boss, Mr. Harrington. On the outside, he was charming, the kind of leader who could easily impress the upper management. But there was something unsettling about him, a slyness that seeped into every interaction we had. I always sensed that he overlooked my work and ideas, yet I brushed those thoughts aside, convincing myself that I was simply being paranoid. The day of the big presentation arrived. The office buzzed with excitement, and I marched into the conference room with my heart pounding. I had rehearsed every line, every statistic, and every insight I planned to share. As I clicked through my slides, a sense of confidence washed over me. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. But just as I concluded my presentation, something went horribly wrong. Mr. Harrington stood up, a smug smile plastered across his face. "Great job, Alex," he said. "Now let me add my thoughts." He proceeded to parrot my ideas, taking credit for my work with an ease that chilled me to the bone. My heart sank into my stomach as I glanced at my colleagues, hoping to see at least one supportive face. Instead, laughter erupted from the back of the room where my so-called friends, Lisa among them, joined in. "Well done, boss," they encouraged him. My body felt frozen, a painful surge of humiliation coursing through me. And you know what Lisa said to me afterward? "You're nothing without us." It felt like a knife cutting straight through my heart. I had believed in the goodness of our friendship, but the truth was laid bare before me. I was completely alone. In that moment, something deep within me shifted. I started questioning everything: my worth, my purpose, and my motivations for fighting to be recognized. It felt like a swirling storm of doubt, leaving me vulnerable and exposed. Was I truly meant to remain in this role forever, a mere shadow of those who soared above me? I couldn't take it anymore. I packed up my things and left the office that day, every breath filled with the weight of betrayal. I was hurt, enraged, and most importantly, determined. I could either wallow in this pain or rise from the ashes. I chose the latter. After the confrontation, I needed time away from that toxic environment. I distanced myself from everyone and everything, allowing the solitude to shape my thoughts. I dove into self-discovery, exploring new skills and talents I had long buried beneath my insecurities. I took online courses in graphic design, marketing, and even public speaking. I invested in myself, molding my identity away from the shadows of Mr. Harrington and my so-called friends. With every new lesson learned, I could feel the confidence growing. It's as if I was shedding a skin that had weighed me down for too long. And as the days melted into weeks, I knew that this was just the beginning. I wasn't going to let them define who I was. Instead, I would let this experience forge a version of me that none of them had ever seen before. A version worthy of respect and acknowledgement. I decided to return to that same office, but this time, I would be the one calling the shots. Little did they know, the quiet Alex they overlooked was gone. A stronger, more determined person was beginning to rise. That would be when they truly realized who I was. As I stepped back into the corporate world, I felt a surge of determination coursing through my veins. The timid Alex was gone, replaced by someone unrecognizable even to myself. I had spent weeks honing new skills, redefining who I was, and now I was ready to make an impact. With each passing day, as I walked the familiar halls, I carried an aura of confidence that was both exhilarating and intimidating. My former colleagues could sense it. I could see the curiosity in their eyes as they whispered among themselves. What happened to him? He seems different. Little did they know, this was only a glimpse of the transformation that lay beneath the surface. I took my seat in meetings, participating actively and sharing insights that had previously gone unnoticed. My designs and strategies began to earn respect, and for the first time, I felt valued for my contributions. The shadow of my old self had faded, and as I glanced at Mr. Harrington, I could see unease creeping into his eyes. He had taken credit for my hard work, but now it was clear that I was no longer going to let anyone walk over me. I silently vowed to show him just how capable I had become. I would rise from the ashes, not just to prove them wrong, but to find my own worth in a world that had nearly consumed me whole. But it wasn't just my boss who started to feel the pressure. Lisa and the others who once mocked my ambitions were starting to look worried. They had long relied on my silence and obedience, but now, with every small victory I achieved, I could see the doubt creeping into their hearts. As they watched me thrive, that familiar sense of betrayal began to gnaw at them. I recall a casual lunch in the break room where Lisa and a few others congregated nearby. I overheard snippets of their conversation. "What if he comes after us?" one of them whispered. I couldn't help but smile at their anxiety. It was the first sign of their fear. Fear of someone they had thought was powerless. The next few weeks were a game of strategy. I began to subtly undermine their plans without compromising my reputation. While they remained steeped in their own complacency, I seized every opportunity to outmaneuver them. I shifted resources in projects, collaborated with teams that my boss had overlooked, and slowly ensured that I was tied to the most successful campaigns. As I watched Mr. Harrington's credibility wane, I could feel satisfaction bubbling inside me. The man who once viewed me as insignificant was now slowly losing the grip he had on the office. He would never know it, but this was only the beginning of his downfall. The process was quietly cathartic. I was no longer a pawn in their game. Instead, I had become a player who could influence the board in my favor. I was beginning to lay the groundwork for the emotional and professional destruction of the very people who once belittled me. But little did I know that my journey would not be walked alone. One afternoon, while working late on a project, I noticed a quiet coworker named Sam who often kept to himself. He was an intelligent guy burdened by insecurities, often dismissed in meetings. I approached him, and as we talked, I realized he had faced betrayal similar to mine. "What's your story?" I asked one day. He sighed, running his hands through his hair. "I stepped up for a presentation once. Same situation, only to have my team leader take all the credit. I just gave up after that." We bonded over our shared experiences, and as we confided in each other, I felt a sense of camaraderie bloom, one I hadn't expected. Sam wasn't the only one. I began to connect with others who had also been overlooked or bullied in the workplace. We formed a coalition of the downtrodden, each adding their unique skills to challenge the toxic environment of the firm. As we pooled our talents, I felt empowered. We shared stories of resilience, and our laughter became a source of strength. We discussed strategies and collaborated on projects that highlighted our capabilities. I realized that together, we were a force unstoppable. And as our alliance grew stronger, I could see the unease deepening in the eyes of Mr. Harrington and my former friends. Their laughter and ridicule were being replaced by confusion and unease. The day came when our combined strength was ready to manifest itself, as we prepared to confront everything those around us had underestimated. This was not just personal revenge, but a rebellion against complacency and betrayal that had long festered in the office. I was no longer simply on a journey of individual redemption. I was leading a movement. The tables were turning. As I stood among my newfound allies, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. The quiet man they thought they knew had transformed into someone ready to take back control, not merely through vengeance, but by elevating others who had been silenced. So here I was, getting ready for the final act in a play they thought would be easy to dismiss. They didn't yet know who I was, but soon they would find out the true strength of a man who had found his voice. And just when they thought they had seen it all, I was ready to show them that they had only scratched the surface. The day had finally come. The atmosphere in the office felt charged with tension as I prepared for the confrontation that had been building in my mind for weeks. I had gathered my allies, and we had collectively decided that enough was enough. It was time to hold Mr. Harrington and my former friends accountable for their betrayals. I took a deep breath and entered the conference room where they were already gathered. I could feel their eyes on me, studying my every move. "Hey, Alex, glad you could join us," Mr. Harrington said with a forced smile. The usual tone of mockery seemed to be absent today. Maybe he sensed the shift in power. "Actually, I have something important to discuss," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. I laid out the evidence I had meticulously compiled over the weeks. Emails, records of meetings, and witness accounts painted a clear picture of their deceit, and as I unveiled my discoveries, I felt a sense of power surge through me. You took credit for my work, and not only that, you undermined me in front of our colleagues, I stated, locking eyes with Harrington. And as for you, Lisa, I turned toward her. You laughed at my humiliation, pretending to be my friend while conspiring against me. The tension in the room thickened as I laid bare their wrongdoings. I watched the expressions on their faces shift from smugness to anxiety. They had always looked down on me, believing I would never dare to confront them. But here I was, standing tall, no longer the timid man they once knew. I think it's time for you both to realize something. You can't oppress someone indefinitely. I am not alone anymore, and I have the evidence to prove that your manipulation ends today. A moment of silence fell over the room. The only sound was the unnerving echo of my words. Mr. Harrington's confident facade cracked, and for the first time he looked genuinely worried. "Alex, you wouldn't dare go to HR," he sputtered, desperation creeping into his tone. "Oh, I wouldn't dare," I smirked. "I already have." And with that, I turned to my allies, who nodded in agreement. Each one was ready to back me up with their own experiences of betrayal, their own stories of being overlooked. I had transformed from an overlooked employee into a rallying force that challenged the very workplace that had once belittled us. The confrontation was intense, and soon the floodgates opened. Colleagues who had been silent about their grievances began to speak up, emboldened by my courage. As secrets spilled, the room turned into a courtroom of truths. The realization set in that it wasn't just my fight, it was everyone's. In that moment, I knew we had already begun to turn the tide. But with the intensity of the confrontation came a weightiness in my chest. Moments later, as I walked out of the conference room, I began to reflect on the moral implications of my actions. Was I looking for revenge, or had this become something greater? What was the cost of pursuing this path? I didn't want to turn into the very people I had risen against. The confrontation had shattered some illusions, but it also left me questioning everything I had fought for. In the days that followed, the office felt different. There was an air of uncertainty. People were hesitant to speak. Colleagues who once cheered for Harrington were now looking at each other with apprehension. My situation had shaken up the corporate hierarchy, but I had a new dilemma. Rather than focusing my energy on revenge, I decided to shift my perspective. Instead of seeing my former friends as mere rivals, I began to see their weaknesses, not as an opportunity for downfall, but as a lesson in what I no longer wanted to become. While Mr. Harrington tried desperately to regain control by shifting blame onto me, I focused on my own growth, honing the skills I had acquired during my time away. I put my energy into projects that showcased my capabilities rather than dwelling on the past. I made strides in my career, consistently earning respect, loyalty, and collaboration from my colleagues rather than fear. It became clear to me that as much as they wished to see me fail, they could no longer hold me back. I watched as my former friends questioned their actions. The day they began to see the ramifications of their betrayal was the day I knew I had truly won. They saw me thrive, and with every small victory, the realization of their own mistakes set in. "Lisa, The one who had mocked my ambition had come to me one day with furrowed brows. "Alex," she said quietly, I'm sorry for how I treated you." There was genuine remorse etched in her expression. I studied her for a moment, feeling a mix of emotions. "You didn't believe in me when I needed it most," I replied, "but I've moved on." It was true. I had grown beyond the need for revenge. Now the thought of vengeance felt hollow. The satisfaction of seeing my former friends wrapped in regret was sweet, but I knew it was not the end I wanted. I aimed higher. My success was my ultimate revenge, a life lived on my own terms. As I stood at my new desk, overlooking the bustling office, I took a moment to reflect. I had transformed from a man shackled by betrayal into someone who commanded respect and led with strength. The victory was not about destruction. It was about celebrating survival and resilience. And in that moment I understood. They didn't know who I was, not until it was too late. I was no longer defined by their betrayal but by my success, my independence, and my newfound power. A life of strength had replaced the shadows of betrayal. And as I prepared to face whatever came next, I knew this journey had transformed not just me, but the foundations of the very space I stood in. I had walked through fire, emerged victorious, and now I stood ready to embrace the future unapologetically.